Right. Well, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Thank you all for joining us. I'm George with the Cook County Assessor's Office. With me, as you may see on screen, we have Catherine from the Fourth Ward Alderman's Office, who's going to give us some opening remarks before we start. So I'll pass it on to Catherine. Please, if you'd like to say a few
Of
words.
course. Thank you, George. I appreciate it. I just want to give a quick thank you to the assessor's office, especially to George and Lupe from the assessor's office for being with us tonight and for helping organize this. Understanding your assessment and knowing whether to file an appeal and how to move through that process can be very difficult and confusing. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have a live Q&A with experts and be able to share those resources with residents of the Fourth Ward. So again, thank you. And thank you to everybody who made time to join us tonight to learn about the assessment process and filing an appeal. But thank you again. And I will put our office email and phone number in the chat if anybody has any questions or and if the Alderman's office can be of service in any way. We're always happy to assist. But thank you again to everybody. And I look forward to an informative webinar.
Perfect. All right. Well, like Catherine mentioned, take down the alderman's information if you need it. Again, thank you to Alderman Lamont Robinson's Fourth Ward office for being with us in this presentation. I put up the QR code on screen for you guys to scan before we get started. If you don't get a chance to scan it before we start or once we get started, don't worry about it. It'll also be at the end. It'll lead you to our page, our social media pages. It'll give you more information about exemptions, appeals, things like that. If you have any questions after the presentation that aren't answered. But without further ado, let's get started. So today I'll be presenting on understanding your reassessment for Hyde Park Township. Now, we'll get into it a little bit more. You were reassessed last year, but you can appeal every year, and that's what we're going to talk about because Hyde Park Township is now open for appeals. So we'll get started here. So first, we'll go over what we're going to present on. So it'll be three sections. First section will be an introduction about what our office does and how we determine values. From there, we'll talk briefly about overview of documents. So we'll go over your first installment versus second installment and your reassessment notices. We'll see examples of all of those. And we'll go over as well what makes up your tax bill. Third part, we'll go over appeals. We'll go over reasons to file an appeal, how to file an appeal, and reading our data. So we'll go over each section. Sounds like a lot, but it won't be, right? But if you have any questions at any point, feel free to drop those in the chat. Also, before I forget, if you know any neighbors, family members, anyone that can benefit from this information, pass it on. It's not just to Hyde Park Township. This applies to any township in Cook County. So good information to pass on. Please share the presentation. And without any more hold up, let's get started. So first portion, like I mentioned, we'll go over an introduction. You can meet the assessor on screen if you haven't a chance to see him, haven't had a chance to meet him. Here he is, Cook County Assessor Fritz Kagi. He was elected into office in 2018. Now, we'll go over the responsibilities of his office. So what the Office of the Assessor does is we set fair and accurate values for 1.9 million parcels of property in Cook County. This sounds like a lot. That's because it is. We're one of the largest counties in the country when it comes to number of parcels. So it's a lot of properties that we're setting values to. Now, because it is a lot of properties, we don't set these values on an individual basis, but rather on a mass appraisal system. And what this means is that we have to use the sales of recent properties in your area that are similar to yours, and they get put into a model. The model determines based on that information, it's likely that your property will sell for this amount. Now, we'll go over that a little bit more into detail in the next few slides. Actually, I think the next slide, next two slides, we'll go over that, like I said, more detail next. What we also do, we administer property tax savings in the form of exemptions, and these exemptions help in lowering your tax bill. Just to give you a general idea of the exemptions, the homeowner exemption, senior exemption, senior freeze, there's a total of 9 exemptions that you can receive or that our office offers. We'll go over all those in a little more detail towards the end of the presentation. So again, if you have questions about those exemptions, feel free to drop them down now, but we'll also go over them later on. Now, there are some things that people confuse our office that we do, that we actually don't do because we are in the process of property taxes, right? And you'll see those things on screen now. So what we don't do, so we don't set your tax rates. Those are actually calculated by the Cook County Clerk's Office, and they're calculated once your levies are set by your local taxing districts. As you can see, the second bullet point is set your levies. We don't do that either. Again, that is your local taxing district. For example, in the city of Chicago, that'll be Chicago Public Schools, the city of Chicago, Chicago Public Libraries, Chicago Public Parks, any of those districts, they set their levies, and that helps calculate the tax rate. We also don't do that we get a lot of questions about, especially with the recent delay, if we don't mail out tax bills. These are sent out by the Cook County Treasurer's Office, and I know the question will come up, so we'll cover it now. We don't know when those will come out. They've been delayed due to a system transition that's countywide. It's affected our office, the clerk's office, so we're still waiting on that date to be determined by the Treasurer's Office. What we also don't do is we don't decide the balance on your tax bill. So that's a combination of your tax rate, levies, value, and a couple other things, and we'll go into detail about your second installment tax bill a little bit later on in the presentation. So we're going to backtrack now, and we're going to go over, again, what we mentioned, how we reassess the county or the Cook County reassessment cycle. So again, 1.9 million parcels of property. It's a lot of properties. We wouldn't be able to do all of them in 1 year. So what we do is we divide the county into 3 regions. The northern suburbs, right, which you see highlighted in dark blue. The south suburbs, which you see highlighted in that marigold yellow, you could call it on screen, and the city of Chicago, which you see in light blue. So depending on where your property is located, that will dictate when your property is reassessed. So for those of us in the city of Chicago, our properties were last reassessed last year, 2024. So with that in mind, you didn't receive any reassessment letters this year. So if you're like, hey, where's my reassessment letter for this from this appeal cycle? Don't worry about it. You haven't received one. We'll go over what they looked like, and you can look for yours for last year. If you didn't receive it, you can reach out to us and we can provide you a copy. But again, don't worry if you haven't received the reassessment letter for this year. So now, during a property reassessment year or during your appeal window, an appeal can be filed within 30 business days of the reassessment notice being mailed or your township opening. So you're going to hear me repeat it a few times throughout the presentation. I'm going to sound like a broken record. But for you in Hyde Park, the deadline will be September 16th, 2025. So again, highlight it, write it down, put it on your fridge, whatever you need to remind yourself. Keep in mind the appeal deadline will be September 16th, 2025. So something to keep in mind, and I'll bring it up again. If it was a quiz, I hope you remember it. Perfect. All right, so that goes over the first section. Now we'll go over overview of documents. Like we mentioned, there's the tax bills, reassessment letters. What does each one look like, and what information is on each of those? So on the screen, you can see an example of all 3 of those documents. So the first section is your property tax bills, the blue one and the yellow one. These are sent out by the Treasurer's Office. They tell you what the amount that you owe in taxes, and you get 2 every year. You get 1 per season, you could call it. The blue one will come during winter or spring. You can think about winter, cold, blue, right? You can associate that together. Now, the first installment bill will be an estimate based on your total balance from the previous year, 55% to be exact. So for example, let's say your 2023 tax bill was $1,000 and your tax bill was $1,000 in 2023. 55% of that would be $550, which would mean that your first installment bill would be $550. So 2023 total bill, for example, $1,000, 55% of that will be $550. That'll be your first installment bill for the next year. The second bill comes every summer or fall. So associate summer with the sun, yellow, right? And that'll have more information, and we'll go over it in detail later on so you can learn about what you should see on there in case you missed anything. So we'll go over that with more detail later on. Actually, the next slide. So perfect. That covers those 2 documents. The next document that you'll see on screen is the reassessment notice. So this notice that you should have received last year for those of you in Hyde Park will let you know what your assessed value changed, your property was changed to. You get this from the assessor's office, again, every 3 years. Next time you'll receive it will be 2027. Again, it'll tell you your PIN, your value, your characteristics, which we'll go over. It's important to pay attention, and your previous values. It'll also have more information, but again, we'll cover that in more detail later on. So again, backtracking to the property tax bill, you can see an example of the second installment bill on screen now. So the first thing you'll see is the value, right? Every property is assessed at 10%, so it'll give you your assessed value. From there, that assessed value gets multiplied by the state equalizer. So the state equalizer is set by the Illinois Department of Revenue, not set by our office, and it can change from year to year. So, this year could be 2.01. That number will be in your tax bill. So keep in mind that number may be different from last year to this year. Once that gets multiplied, that gives you your equalized assessed value, and your equalized assessed value gets multiplied by your local tax rate. Again, your local tax rate is not decided by us, but by your local municipalities, and that will give you your total tax amount before exemptions. So next section you'll see is the exemptions, and those are the ones you apply for with our office. Again, most common ones are the homeowner, senior freeze, but there's more, and we'll go over those in detail later on. And you'll see the amount that each exemption saves you on your property tax bill there. You'll see that towards the bottom in the left-hand side under tax calculator. So it's important, again, check your values, make sure they're correct. Keep in mind that those state equalizers, local tax rates will change. Unfortunately, not through our office, but make sure that what you can do through our office is if you missed any exemptions, you can file a certificate of error to correct your tax bill or to receive a refund. So we'll go over that in more detail once we get to the exemption section. So important information to look at when you get that second tax bill. Wonderful. Also, on that tax bill, you'll see on top of that this section titled Where Your Money Goes. So the Cook County Treasurer's Office now gives you a breakdown of where your money is being spent, and it gives you a figure of the changes from one year to the other. So if you can see the example on the screen, this property was being charged $228 in 2022 for the Board of Education. 2023, it increased to $252.33. It lets you know the difference, right? It lets you know exactly where that amount of your tax bill is being spent. So that way, if you want to say, hey, Board of Education, where's my money being spent? You can attend those meetings. State of Chicago, where's my money being spent? You can attend those meetings and ask questions there. Because again, these levies, they're not set by us, but they're by the districts that you see on your tax bill. All right, now we'll go over one of the documents that our office sends, like we mentioned, the reassessment notice. Like I said, you didn't receive one this year. You should have received one last year as part of our cycle for the county. Reassess the city of Chicago in 2024. And it should have looked like this. Top section, you would have seen your PIN. Right beneath that, you would have seen the new estimated fair market value assigned to your property by our office. Right from there, you would have seen the characteristics of your property. Very important that you pay attention to these characteristics in case we have anything wrong, because that is the reason to appeal, and we'll touch on that later on in the third section. Beneath that, it'll give you the assessed value history, your values for, again, the current year, the previous years as well. And beneath that, it'll give you the deadline by which to appeal during your reassessment year. Again, you didn't receive one this year, but the deadline for you in Hyde Park is September 16, 2025. So again, here comes the broken record. Don't forget it, September 16, 2025. Now, there is more information on the back side of the notice, and you can see how that looks like on screen now. So it lists the exemptions that our office offers. For example, the homeowner, senior exemption, senior freeze, lists all of those, and you can revise your history here. You can also do it on our website. I recommend that you all do it because if, again, you missed exemptions that you should have received in the past 5 years, you can apply for a certificate of error to receive refunds for that. And again, we'll touch on that later on at the exemption section. The bottom of the list, or the reassessment notice, pardon me, you'll also see our contact information. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to us there as well. Awesome. Moving on. Let's look at the data for our office for properties. So recommend that before you file an appeal, you review your township valuation report. So if you look up Hyde Park valuation report, it'll look like what you see on screen now. And it lets you know the trends in the real estate market for your township in the last few years. So for example, you can see on screen that in 2020, single family homes, the median sales price was 152. They've increased to 163 in 2021, to 172 in 2022, and they decreased again in 2023. You can see that the market value, estimated market value in 2024, the average for single family homes in Hyde Park was 128,000. So again, that gives you an indication of, okay, I am above the median value, so maybe I should file an appeal because, I'm likely above everyone else, or I'm below, which maybe you're assessed the correct value. You can also see that information for condos and multifamily homes. And again, it's important to review the data so you can get an idea of where values are shifting due to the market and the sales that happened there in Hyde Park. It's also important that when you look at your reassessment notice, that you pay attention to your neighborhood code, because once you're looking at the valuation report and you see this information on screen, the little graph, if you scroll down on our page, you'll also see this map. It's important that you get your neighborhood code, because once you identify it, you can type it on the first search bar, right? And it'll highlight it for you. Once you click on it, on the little highlighted neighborhood, you'll see the exact number of sales in your neighborhood code for 2024. You'll see the minimum sales price and the maximum sales price. Again, we can't do the appraisal individually, so we have to do the sales, and you can see that the sales are real. You can see the numbers that they're happening, right? And you can see the minimum, maximum amount. Just again, to get an idea of, okay, yeah, these houses are being sold for this amount of money. Something else that was added to our website recently, I believe this week, if I'm not mistaken, actually, pardon me, last week, is a home value report. So this gives you an idea of how our office estimated the value of your home. So the home value report explains how our mass appraisal system estimated the value. It uses past home sales and property characteristics to learn about the real estate market. And the map provides a map. It gives you the 5 most significant sales that the model used. It'll give you the characteristics of the property, and it'll even rate them by how important the characteristics are to your value report. So something I want to highlight is that this isn't a comparable tool, right? For comparables, we'll talk about those later on. There will be a tool within the appeal application. You can also use something like Cook Viewer. There are other tools, but this isn't for comparable properties. This is only so you can get an idea, okay, these sales were used to come up with the value of my property. So something to keep in mind. Well, for more information, you can visit that link on screen. It'll be on our website. All right, perfect. So now, getting started with your appeal. How do I do that? So filing online, it's free. It can be done on our website. The system will guide you through the filing. You can start the draft, save it, revise it, submit it all from your house, and you don't have to worry about going anywhere. You can submit supporting documentation, for example, pictures, appraisal, narratives, and more. I will go over kind of evidence that you can provide for those instances of which you appeal, but I would recommend, if you're filing an appeal, include evidence, so that way you can say, hey, my property is not worth this amount, it's worth this amount. Reminder, check your appeal deadline. Again, you'll see it on screen, September 16th, broken record goes on. Don't forget it, make a note of it, please, and don't leave it to last second. So the appeal process, how does it work? So again, your township opens and you have 30 business days to file. If you disagree with the fair market value that our office assigned to your property, you can file an appeal. You must supply a reason. We'll go over the 3 most common reasons. Again, you must select one, but if all 3 reasons apply to your property, select all 3. There will even be more, which we'll go over briefly, very, very briefly, but select the ones that apply to your property. From there, our analyst will review the evidence to determine whether to change your property's assessment and by how much. And after that, you'll receive a letter letting you know the value has been decreased, so there's been no change to the assessed valuation. You normally receive the letter 2 months after your township closes. So approximately November, middle of November, late December is when you get your letter for Hyde Park Township. Awesome. So main reasons to file an appeal. Like I mentioned, 3 reasons. First one is the lack of uniformity. So the assessment says your property value is different from similar homes. For example, my neighbor's home is the exact same model as mine, but was valued much lower. What this means is, for example, let's say home property owner A, his property is being valued at $500,000. Home property owner B is being valued at $250,000. These properties are the exact same, built the exact same year, same block, right? It should be valued the same, but they're not. Home property value, home owner A will need to file an appeal to say, hey, this isn't right. The value should be the same. There's lack of uniformity. And that's when you need to look for comparable property. So that's the first reason. Second reason would be for overvaluation. Going back to that example of property owner A being valued at $500,000. Property owner says, hey, my property is not worth that much. You have it wrong. Pretty much, as you can see on screen, the assessment says your property value is higher than what you could sell the property for. An example is my home has had no major renovations and it would not sell for what newer homes are being sold for. If you're filing for this reason, I would urge you to include some sort of evidence, pictures as to why your property should be assessed lower, and including a narrative explaining what those pictures show, so that way our office can see the properties. Something to keep in mind is that when we do the valuations, we can't see the inside of home, so that's why it's important for you to show us, hey, I have mold in my basement, I have, floods that come in, I have squirrels living in my attic, whatever the case may be. Include those pictures in a narrative. Last reason would be for incorrect property description. The assessment lists incorrect information about my property. So, like I talked about earlier, the reassessment notice will let you know your, square footage for the property, for the building itself, for the land, the type of build. So, for example, my reassessment notice says my home is 500 square feet larger than it really is. So, if any information is wrong, you can file an appeal for that to say, hey, this is the correct information. Please make the changes. And again, you should include some sort of evidence to show why that information is incorrect. So, for example, your closing documents that list the livable square footage of the property, if you've had an appraisal recently, or refinance, or home equity line of credit, home equity loan, that sort of thing. If you have that appraisal, include that to show what the correct information should be for your property. All right, how to file online. So we can't really file a real appeal online, so we'll just kind of go over what it'll look like for you, and you can see how the process works, what you need to add where, and if you have any questions, again, put those in the chat, so that way we can try to get those answered. Before you get started, you will definitely need an email address and your PIN or address. Things that are optional, documents that you can provide include, again, pictures, comparable properties, market analysis, or appraisals. These will depend on the type of filing that you're submitting, right, or the type of appeal. So if you're filing based on lack of uniformity, comparable properties will be what you need to have as evidence. Again, our evaluation, maybe pictures in an appraisal, or pictures in a narrative, or maybe an appraisal if you are filing for incorrect property description. So keep that in mind before you file. All right. To get started, just go to our website. Once you're there, you'll see at the top the section that's listed as appeals. Click on that. We'll cover over that, and you'll see the line that says file online. It'll be the third line. Once you click on that, it'll take you to this section you see on screen now, and you'll see these options: residential, condo, commercial. You click on the one that is appropriate for you. If you have a condo, click on condo. If you're doing a commercial one, a commercial property, click on that. In this case, we'll pretend that we're filing a residential appeal. So we click on that, and it'll take us to the sign-in page. If you filed for an appeal in the past or exemptions in the past, just type in your email, your password if you remember it. If you don't, recover the password and sign in. Or if not, create a password. It's free. It'll send you a confirmation email once you confirm. It'll let you go through. From there, you can search your property with your PIN or address. Just keep in mind, don't do it with both. So if you search the property with both pieces of information, you'll likely encounter an error and no property will appear. So either the PIN, which I would recommend because it's easier, or the address. Once you hit search, the property will show up. Something to keep in mind is that the previous owner may appear, especially if you recently purchased the property. If the previous owner does appear, don't worry about it. Click on start filing and it'll let you proceed. You can change the name of who's filing the appeal later on in the application. So once you do that, you see the guidelines for the appeal. Just click on those two arrows that you see on screen if you agree with the guidelines. Once you do that, click next and it'll take you to the next screen. Here is where you can file a certificate of error if there were any incorrect characteristics about your property in previous years. For example, let's go back to that example where we said your property had 500 more square feet than it really did. If we had that information wrong in 2024, 2023, you would click those 2 years and say, hey, there was wrong information about my property in these years. Please make the change. You click on those. In this case, let's pretend there's no certificates of error that need to be filed. You click on next. It'll let you proceed without clicking anything, and it'll let you add additional pins on the next screen. So if you have a property with a vacant lot on the side, that's part of your property. You include that here, for example. Just keep in mind, this is where you don't add comparable properties. That'll come later on in the application. Again, only for additional pins that are part of your property. In this case, let's pretend there isn't any. You click next, and it'll take you to the filer section who's completing the appeal. You click on taxpayer owner, so you're filling it on your own behalf, and that will make this next section appear. In the first section that appears, again, you're filing it on your own behalf, so you put taxpayer owner. If your name did appear when you search the property, you click on those three little lines where the second arrow is, and you pick your name from the list. You click on it, and you click select, and it'll populate your address, city, state, zip code. You'll have to type in your phone number and email still, but it'll fill out the rest of the information for you. If it doesn't show up, don't worry. If you check the box underneath that line, you can put who is the person filing the appeal. Again, you'll have to put in your address manually, city, information, all that good stuff. Once you have that in there, click next, and it'll take you to the next section, which is where you can correct the property's characteristics. Again, important that you check that information. Here's where we have the age about the property incorrect. You can make that change. Type of residence, the number of bathrooms you can change. You have central air conditioning, solar heating. You can also change the exterior construction. If you have a basement, partial basement, what have you, you can make all these changes here. Again, so we can have the correct information about the property. So I would take a few minutes on the screen, making sure everything's correct. And once you do that, you'll hit next, and it'll take you to the appeal application section, where here you can let us know what you think your property should be valued. If you have an idea, for example, based on an appraisal, you can put that number there where you see the yellow arrow. If you don't, just again, you could provide the evidence and put 0, and from there, our analyst will review the evidence to say, okay, the property should be worth X amount. So if you have an idea, put that number there. If you don't, it's okay. Put 0, and you can continue. Further down that page, you'll see this section, which again is that reasons to appeal. And again, there are multiple. The ones we went over are the lack of uniformity, property description error, and overvaluation, the most common ones. So if all three of those apply to you, click on those. If only 2 of them apply to you, click on those. But there are more. So if the building no longer exists, has been demolished, you can click that. If there's been a fire, you can click that. Just keep in mind, if you file for a fire, you'll need to provide evidence such as pictures, insurance documents, things like that. So again, for whatever you're filing for, make sure that you include some evidence so that way it can be reviewed to say, okay, yes, there needs to be a change in value. Perfect. Depending on if you're filing, for example, for property description error, you may see the field check request change to yes. If it does, don't worry about it. We won't ever go inside your property again. We can't. So just keep in mind that you can just proceed with that. If someone does go out from our office, we'll just look at the outside of the building. That's something to keep in mind. At the bottom of the page, you can let us know how the property is being used, single family, 6 apartments or less, whatever the case may be. And once you click one of those sections or selections, you can click on next, and it'll take you to the comparable section. Here is where you'll include your comparable properties. The good thing is that once you type in your PIN or address into the application, it'll automatically know what kind of property you have, right? So you can just find comparables based on that. So I'm going to move on to the next screen so you can see how the whole page looks. Where you see find comparables, you click on that, right? And it'll find comparables again based on your property characteristics. It'll be a list that it comes up. After a bit of loading, it'll take a few minutes to load, but it will show you the values of those properties. It'll show you how close they are to you. It'll show you the address, the PIN. It'll give you a good amount of information. So you can choose from that list the properties that you'd like to include. Something to keep in mind when choosing comparable properties, the stronger to help them be stronger, as you can see on screen, is the closer they are to you, the stronger they'll be. Make sure they're made of the same construction, of similar square footage, and within the same neighborhood code. If you don't have any comparable properties, for example, you can always say, write a little narrative saying, hey, there's no comparable properties for my property. I'm a unique property, and again, maybe include some pictures to show that you are unique. Perfect. So let's say we don't pick any comparable properties, then we move on. You click next, and you're on to the attachment section. So this section is for you to attach, again, any evidence that you'd like to include so our analysts can review it for part of your appeal. Some examples include pictures, a narrative, appraisal, or recent closing documents. So for example, if you recently purchased your property and we have it assessed over than what you purchased the property, you can include those documents to say, hey, I bought it for less, please adjust the value. So again, what we're trying to do We're trying to estimate the market value of properties. Make sure you got all your evidence that you'd like to include there. And then once you feel comfortable with what you have in there, you hit next at the bottom of the screen. Repeat the process with the next at the bottom. But from here, you'll get to the last section, the submit section. Again, you're going to type in the name of the person who's filing the appeal and your phone number. And then once you're comfortable with everything, you hit submit. Once you do that, you'll have this little scary, not scary, but this little box appear asking you if you're sure you want to submit. If you want to take a break from it, if you feel overwhelmed by the process, what have you, hit no. It'll save the draft and you can come back to it later. Just again, make sure that you come back to it before September 16th because that is the deadline. I would maybe recommend you file it on the 15th at the latest if you decide to walk away from it, but just keep in mind the 16th will be the deadline, so don't forget. Once you're comfortable with everything, you hit yes, and what will appear is the screen that you see on screen. It'll let you know your filing ID, right? So if you don't receive that letter that we mentioned earlier, you can always reach out to us with the filing ID saying, hey, I submitted appeal number 123456. What was the result of it? You can also look at those results on our website by searching your property, and we'll go over how to do that here in the next few slides. If you do win your appeal, your new value will be reflected on your second installment bill for 2026. So again, the ones coming up, you won't see that value reflected. You'll see it on the second one that arrives next year because taxes are paid 1 year in the year. So during 2026, we'll be paying 2025 taxes, which is the value you're appealing now. Awesome. Like I mentioned, you can check your property's history on our website. You can search with the PIN if you have that. If you don't, it's so okay. You can search with the address. Once your property appears, then you find it. You can look at your exemption history, which I highly recommend. Again, if you miss any exemptions, you can file certificates of error to receive refund for the last 5 years up to 2020. You can check the appeal history. So if you did file an appeal with our office and you didn't receive anything, you can check that. You can read more about assessment history. And again, you can read more information about how we do assessments through that mass appraisal system. All can be done on our website, and I recommend each of you to do it. Like we talked about, there's 9 exemptions. There's one you won't see on screen, but I'll cover it. It's a fairly new exemption that was added. But the most common exemption is the homeowner exemption. For those of us in the city of Chicago, it saves around $700 of your property tax bill for the year. But there's other exemptions that you may qualify for, like, for example, the senior exemption, which regardless of income or anything, as long as you were born in 1959, you can receive for 2024. If you were born in 1960, you apply for that in the upcoming spring for 2026. Because again, taxes are paid 1 year in the year. But there's more. So for example, the senior freeze exemption does have some income requirements, but if you are 65 or older, and you qualify for this exemption, I highly recommend that you apply for it. One of the best exemptions, the persons with disability exemption, there's the returning veterans exemption, the veterans with disability exemption, which you have to be receiving at least 30% of VA connected disability to qualify for, the home improvement exemption, the long-time occupant exemption, and the one that doesn't show up on screen is the World War II veteran exemption. You can read more about the exemptions on the website on screen. So that way, if you do have any questions about any of these exemptions, you can get more information about them and learn their requirements and what you need to do. Again, you can file for any of these exemptions for as far back as 2020 by filing a certificate of error. It's similar to the appeal process where it'll walk you through what you need. Just keep in mind, you may need to include some supporting documentation for previous years. So for example, if you're applying for a missed exemption in 2020, you may need to include bank statements, internet bill. There's a whole list of things you can provide as evidence. So keep that in mind. All right, and we're at the end here of the presentation. So we are here to help. Feel free to contact us. Number on screen or on social media. You can also reach out to us at any of our locations. Visit us for assistance in our Chicago location downtown, at the Markham Courthouse, Skokie, or Bridgeview, or you can even sign up to receive email updates. For example, when townships open for appeal, you can sign up to receive that. When exemption applications open, things like that. So I highly recommend. That can be, you can sign up for the newsletter by scanning the QR code on screen. All right, let's see if we have any questions for the presentation. It looks like there aren't. So I just want to thank all of you for joining us again. Thank you to the Forest Ward Alderman's office for for helping us host this event and for being here with us. To Catherine, it's important that you can check your exemption history. If you disagree with your value, make sure that you submit the exemption by the appeal application, pardon me, by September 16th. Just don't forget that that deadline, and just don't forget too that the Forest Board contact information is in the comment section of the presentation. So since there are no other questions, again, thank you all for being here, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Be safe.